Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison.
Good morning, everybody. It's actually just past 9 o'clock in the morning, and you'll have to forgive my attire for today. I didn't really sleep very well last night, but I wanted to get this video out this morning because I felt it was important. I want to talk today about this topic, responsible men. And this was a great quote that I found about Abraham Lincoln. It said, responsibility, you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. And I think that, although that's very good advice, Mr. President, I think you're a little bit off the mark in the sense that there are many men that cannot even evade the responsibility of today, never mind trying to evade responsibility for tomorrow. And I first just want to tell you a quick story. So last week, I have a friend of mine. His name is Mike. Great guy. He has a special needs child, as I do. They're both roughly the same age. They're kind of on different ends of the of the of the spectrum, as it's called. But his son is high functioning as mine. But you know, both of our sons have challenges, and so what I wanted to do, and I won't use their real names, but we'll just call them both Sam. Okay. So I wanted to take my friend Mike, and I wanted to do something nice for him. So I was able to do that. So at noon yesterday, I was able to pick him up at his house, and I was able to do this. Pizza first. We had about an hour before confession, so we went out and got some pizza. Then we went to the Cathedral of Christ the King for confession and mass. This is an external shot probably done in the late spring. It's a beautiful, beautiful church, as I show you. This is a back shot of the cathedral with the organs and the stained glass, 102 pipes, I believe they have in there. This is a long shot, and obviously there's a wedding that's being done. It's very, very popular for weddings, but it is not cheap to get married there, even if you're a parishioner. And, but it is, if you want to have the wedding of your lifetime, I'm telling you, it's a beautiful place to have it. And then finally, this is the high altar for that. You'll see the engraved. Now, just looking from left to right, the structure on the left is in Latin, it's called the cathedra, but in translated English, it's called the chair, and that's where traditionally the chair of the bishop, or in this case, the archbishop, is. An archbishop is a supervisor of other bishops. That's what makes him an archbishop, but he's still a bishop in there. So he's kind of, an archbishop is equal among the bishops underneath his supervision. He's the first of equals. And then as the Holy Father, the Pope of Rome is the first of equals among all popes or among all bishops throughout the world. So why do I need to start the story this way? Well, what I wanted to do was go and take my friend out this following Saturday. And I texted him, and I went and I'll read you the text because it's very insightful. But anyway, so I texted him at 7:15 on Saturday morning on the 22nd. I said, Sam, or my friend Mike. I said, do you want to do it again today? I'll get you at noon, question mark. I've had I said shifty, but that's the autocorrect, and I think you can fill in the blank there. His response, I can't out as much as I'd like to. I'm dealing with Sam, trying to get things stable. It's been a tough process. My response is, understood. just knowing that we've both have had crappy weeks. It's been a sucky week. He responds back, like we've talked about so often, we take care of everyone. We pray for everyone. We go to confession. We go to Mass. We worship the Holy Trinity. But yeah, I'm imperfect. I'm a sinner. But I didn't sin every day, but I try hard. Then his comment is, may I just have a piece of fruit? That's an inside joke reference to a movie, but I'll leave it at that. That's how our conversation went this morning. Well, yesterday I went and I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's also a priest. He very much knows what my situation is. And my comment to him was, I'm really getting kind of tight of the trite sayings that, are offered. I know priests are not there. I mean, they're not therapists. And believe me, I've been to therapists, and therapists pretty much offer you the same thing, except, you got to pay. I had to pay for it $150 an hour to hear something that I already knew. And that was my biggest beef about going to therapy was, tell me something that I don't know, all right? Because you pour your heart out. They listen. They collect the money. And at the end of the day, what do you get out of it? Nothing. And again, I'm sure therapists fulfill a function. I've just never had much luck with therapy. And, one of the Catholic sayings that is what I call OIP, offer it up. Okay, so here is the Catholic theological version of this, is that we offer our sufferings every day to the sufferings of Christ on the cross. Okay, I get it. I understand it. But part of that still remains with us, and that's the thing of responsibility. And what I mean by that is this, is that let's say, you're really having a terrible day. Your wife is just on your case for whatever. Your kids are acting up. You've got bills that need to be paid, and as we say down south, we have too much month at the end of the money, right? The money came in, sure, but there were so many other obligations, it just exhausted it. It just stripped it. Kind of unlike what we're... Not only we're seeing our federal government doesn't have that problem, they're giving money away for God knows what, and, we as taxpayers don't know, but that's cause for another video. But my whole point is that we're supposed to unify our sufferings to the cross. But the problem is that we can do that, but we can't unify our responsibilities to that, right? If you're a husband, you're a husband. If you're a dad, you're a dad. You can't take that off even for a day. You've acquired it, and the only way that it's coming off, if you're a father, if your kids can finally leave the house, but in today's economic, good luck with that. So that's not a viable option. And as a husband, I mean, the only way you're released from your marital vow is that people say when the priest and minister, till death do you part, because they're not married people in heaven, contrary to popular belief. Our Mormon friends that we're united for all eternity. No, we're not, actually. And Jesus spoke of that, because there's no children, there's no giving in marriage in heaven. Marriage is a construct here for the fidelity of men and women, but once you get to heaven, there are no things as marriage. So contrary to popular belief. And the thing that reminds me of this responsibility is if you'll remember in the movie Apollo 13, it was interesting because this was not the original crew. Ken Mattingly, portrayed by Gary Sinise in the movie, supposedly was supposed to come down with chicken pox or whatever. He never did. But at the last minute, there was a last-minute substitution by Jack Swigert. And Swigert was the command module pilot. uh, Jim Lovell was the commander of the mission, and then Fred Hayes was the lunar module pilot. Okay, so they all had separate and distinct responsibilities, and yet, as the story goes, at about 55 hours into the mission, Mission Control goes and tells Swigert, go ahead and stir the oxygen tanks, because the problem is that the oxygen tanks is not a gaseous; it's frozen, or it's subliquefied, and there's a stirring mechanism, kind of like when you make pudding, and sometimes you have to stir the milk, the warm milk, and the chocolate powder, to get it going so that it can become pudding. Well, the stirring of the oxygen tanks was to stir that slurry so that it didn't get frozen. So that's what Schweiker did, and unfortunately, because of a malfunction, the tank stirred, and then the tanks blew up. And as a result of that, one of their two oxygen tanks was completely blown up into obliteration. The other one was damaged. And next thing you know, they're not on the moon. Well, in this particular scene, Fred Hayes, portrayed by Bill Paxton, they got into this argument about stirring the tanks. And when he stirred tanks, basically Hayes is trying to blame Schweiger. And Schweiger pushes back, saying, hey, listen, they told me to stir the tanks. They told me to stir the tanks. That's what I did. I did my job. Well, finally, Lovell has to step in and basically go and tell these guys, listen, knock it off, okay? If the call came in to Houston and they told me to stir the tanks, I stirred the tanks. That was a tremendous level of responsibility and leadership. And I commend Lovell for doing that. I mean, he had to calm his crew down. It's not like they could, open up the hatch and someone can take a walk outside. They always go outside and cool down. Well, this is outer space. That option's unavailable. So he had to squash it as quick as possible, and that's what he did. But the whole point is that, Hayes was frustrated, obviously, because they're not going to get a chance to walk on the moon. Schweiger is concerned because, he thinks, they think he's not capable of doing his job, and this kind of like, subliminally affirmed it. Some people would think. And Lovell is just trying to hold his team together as best he can. Well, that's a function of responsibility. And the fact of the matter is that we go and we see this all the time, and yet, and I don't mean to be sexist, but I'm just going to address this as fathers and husbands going forward, is that we cannot evade responsibility. Now, if you're, let's say, a single mom, right, you're doing both duties, and I respect that, and I understand that. And this would apply equally to you. The responsibility is yours, and you cannot evade it. And you're just dealing with it as best you can, and sometimes we deal with it than others. Okay, so this is the crew now. They're coming back. Schweiker is in the command seat. Okay, at liftoff, Lovell is in the command seat because if he's got to abort the mission, he's the only one that's got that permission or authorization. Okay, but now they're coming back to reentry, and Lovell is not in command. Lovell has to give that responsibility to Schweiger. Now, Schweiger is, for all practical purposes, in command, and it's his job to get the three of them home. And, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I won't do a spoiler alert, but I'm just saying is that everyone has responsibilities. Everyone has got to do their responsibility. So the next thing I wanted to go and show you is this, and this is something that I have struggled with, especially when I was out of work for over 2 years. Okay, so the verse is, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." Right? Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. As a matter of fact, on my Liturgy of the Hours book, when I got the book cover, I got this very same as my book cover. So as you can see over here, right? For I know, so I know the plans. I'm just trying to. Okay. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29. Well, I have found that in studying sacred scripture, that as much as the verse is nice, what you typically need to do is you need to go 2 verses in back and then 2 verses in front. So here is Jeremiah 29:11, maybe in a more fuller context. And it's simply this, okay? Thus says the Lord, after 70 years have elapsed for Babylon, will I deal with you and fulfill my promise to bring you back to this place. Now, just for some context, the Israelites were actually conquered by the Babylonians. The Babylonians brought them to Babylonia, so thus creating what is known as the Jewish diaspora. So the Jews are away from their homeland for 70 years, right? However, the Babylonians now have made a command decision to say, okay, we're going to let you go. We're going to let you go back to your homeland. So I know well the plans I have for you, oracle of the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for woe, as to give you a future of hope. When you call me and come and pray to me, I will listen to you. And when you look for me, you will find me. Yes, when you seek me with all of your heart. Now, again, this is beautiful from sacred scripture, but I can tell you that my friend, Mike, and I have looked for the Lord several times. And it's tough. He's about 5 years older than I am. He's dealing with a special needs son, as I am. Unfortunately, in his case, he is not married, but I am. But at the same way, we're both fathers, and we're both husbands. Because even though he doesn't have an ex-wife, that was what he assumed. And the fact of the matter is that responsibility never, ever goes away. So when you go and you look at, and I use this just for the IRS, but for every single person that's in that level of responsibility of taking care of a family, it's getting tougher and tougher all the time. And I can honestly, I used to ask, I have what is known as a personal board of directors. If you have never heard of this concept, that may be something that you may want to consider doing. And here's what my personal board does for me. They are typically anywhere between 8 to 10 people that I have selected. They are typically anywhere between 5 to 10 years older than I am, so that give me a sense of perspective. So for me, I'll be turning 65. They're typically minimum age of 70, more closer to 75. I've had one, he's closer to 80. But, he still gives great advice. And I love the man to death for doing so. But my point is simply this, is that I've asked my personal board one question and kind of done a round robin. Because everyone talks about, as you approach your quote-unquote your golden years. Well, first of all, they're not golden. Trust me, they are not golden. I won't tell you the response again. I don't want to get kicked off of YouTube, but the whole point is that, trust me, they're not golden. But when I ask the second question, or the first question is that as you approach retirement and beyond, does your life actually get easier? Because, what are we convinced about retirement? That now we're going to be just totally free. We can play as many rounds of golf as we want. We can go and live anywhere because we don't have the kids anymore. Well, that won't be my case, but, somehow that we're going to, one day you're living in Atlanta, Georgia, the next day you're going to be living in Fiji because that's where you've relocated to. Well, in my personal board of directors, I've asked that question. And under an H2 split between what is paid or no. So the result is that, first of all, ESU does change, you change, but it doesn't change for the better. It's only get changed differently. And that kind of shocked me because this isn't the whole thing that life should get better. You know, as you get older, you have less responsibility. No. In fact, your responsibility gains more because now as your children are struggling with adult life, they will frequently come back to you. It's not uncommon that when you were earlier, you had no concept of the bank of mom and dad. And yet, when you're in your 50s and 60s, you are the bank of mom and dad because your kids are not, for whatever reason, they're not able to make it on their own. And the reason why is, and again, I hate to sound like, but just as a frame of reference, okay? I graduated college in 1984. I had a twin brother that went to West Point, graduated in 1985. Somewhere about 1988, I had $3,300 in student loan debt, which my father, because of the constant berating of my mother, my father paid for in its entirety. Okay. I never once went and asked my parents for money because, frankly, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to get railed. So I didn't. But that was the responsibility of growing up. What I mean going forward, now, there's a beautiful song. I'm going to play its entirety. For some of you who may know, it's Jesus Take the Wheel. And it's not mine. It's Carrie Underwood's, and I don't take any responsibility. I'm just using it under the fair use doctrine. But the whole point is, I think that, and this is probably the sexist part of the presentation, but just understand where I'm coming from, is that as much as we would like to go and say, Jesus, take the wheel for men, and I would say, sure, go ahead and do it. But at the end of the day, it's going to come back to you. And at some point, you're going to have the wheel thrust back on you, for good or for ill. So let's just listen to the song first, and then we'll pick it up from there. Now, there were a couple things that in that video that I wanted to react to, and because I think it's very important, is that how Ms. Underwood went and portrayed the role of men, and it kind of goes to my central point. First of all, the scene with the older man feeding his wife. If he wasn't there, what was going to happen to her? Were her kids going to magically show up in this day and age? No, probably not. Families are more dispersed than ever. Now, 60, 70 years ago, everyone lived close by. Something happened with Ma, or because Dad died or whatever. The kids were supposed to be there. There weren't such things. The whole idea of a nursing home or a rest home is really more of a modern convenience, because that's not how families operate. But having said that, the other one that I was a little bit perturbed with was the scene with the young wife, and the bills throwing it in her husband. It's almost like, they can't pay the bills, but I just got the subtext that somehow he's responsible for paying the bills. I get that. But the magnitude of the bills is kind of a joint responsibility, right? I mean, they shouldn't have been throwing the bills at him. That's my point. But once again, as a man, he's going to have that responsibility of making sure that, now she comes in and you get this semblance, well, maybe I'm sorry. Okay, fine. But that doesn't take the bills away. I mean, the bills are going to have to be dealt with. So I just want to leave you with this last image, and it's not going to be a very motivational image, but it is the last image. Ooh, excuse me, fighting this flu or whatever. And that's the last image, and it's the crown of thorns. You know, our blessed Lord wore the crown of thorns because the Romans mocked him in being a king. They gave him a reed as a scepter, and they gave him a crown of thorns. But the fact of the matter is that, at least to me, is that reminder, is that, you know, we are not going to be relieved of our responsibility until our final day, our final moment, our final breath. And I think that going forward, we are going to be in for a long, hot summer. I think that there is so much disengagement going on, to the extent that we have never gone through this before. Maybe to the extent of the Great Depression, but then again, I wasn't around for that. But it certainly feels that way. Now, the problem is that it seems like we created mayhem, but we're not. We're just trying to figure out what's the best way to spend our money. But then again, if you were a probationary, employee with the federal government at the start of your career, thinking, well, this is the government, it'll be relatively secure. And then you get a notice saying, guess what? As my British friends would say, your job has been made redundant. Well, it's not a redundancy, it's a cut. Okay? So, but we on the civilian side have been enduring that for years, and we still are. So it's going to be a long time before this economy gets straight. Now, I believe that it will, but the problem is there's going to be so much pain involved that some people are going to be able to endure the pain and other people are not. And again, that goes back to the whole issue of responsibility. As men, we have to accept our responsibility. Yes, we must embrace it. To the point of pain, yes, but we will embrace it because we have no other choice. Unlike our wives that can go and, throw their hands up and give it to Jesus, well, guess what? That ball's going to come back down, and guess who's got to catch it? It's going to be us, the responsible men. Irresponsible men are just that. They're irresponsible. They take no responsibility for their actions, and that's what makes them irresponsible and not to be preferred in this society. But unfortunately, a lot of responsible men are going to get hurt inadvertently or advertently. I don't know. So what am I trying to say at the end of this video? Well, again, recognizing that we are all in this together. We are going to have to figure out a way that we can go and do this. And I think to some extent we're going to be challenged to be charitable more so, because the need is going to be there. Are we going to be to the point where we're setting up soup kitchens like we did in the 30s? I don't know. But if you ever watched a line outside a food bank, yeah. And I can see that, like St. Vincent de Paul societies and Catholic churches, the way they work is that they take up a single collection once a month. Whatever they collect, that's what they distribute. And they don't make large donations. Typically, like if you need, let's say, $100 to get your electricity back on, you might get $80. Now, they're hoping that you can get the other 20. Again, they'll help, but they're not going to cover everything because they can't. Because there's a line of people behind them that are looking for that same help, and they're going to try to do that. So, once again, try to know that you are not alone in this. Certainly seek out whatever options that you can with respect to charity. I know that's going to be the toughest part because you're going to feel like if I accept charity, I failed my family. Okay? But I'm here to tell you, no, you didn't fail you. The economy failed you, but you didn't fail. Right? Because 2 weeks ago, you did have a job. Because if you weren't doing something right 2 weeks ago, you wouldn't have been in that job. So the economy has failed us. And to some extent, our leaders have failed us. But now somebody's got to take responsibility for setting this thing right, back on track the way it's supposed to be. I hope it happens. But it is going to come at a great cost. Great cost. Okay, even try to think of the dollar value, but it's going to be trillions of dollars in effort. But that's what it's going to take to save our country. So, again, we're all going to be wearing that crown of thorns. Not physically, but certainly mystically and mentally. And I just hope that we all have the strength to be able to endure it. So then going forward, we walk out of here victorious. Well, that's it, guys. That's all I got. Thanks so much for listening. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, but more importantly, give me some comments because I'd love to reach out to you. God love you. Thanks.